welcome back from that short break. Remember, we are live on social media. That is Facebook and Twitter. All you need to do is subscribe to our pages. For Facebook, it is Urban Television, and Twitter, it is at Urban TV Uganda. And you'll be able to catch the show live. Remember that in case of any questions or in case you want to be part of this particular conversation, we have a social media post on both Facebook and Twitter. You can head there and use the hashtag Urban Today. You can tag me personally at Aine Dasha, that's for Twitter, and at Willis Daily for Twitter as well. This morning, we're going to be talking about internet rights and freedom in Uganda. Now, apparently, the big question is, did you know that access to the internet is actually your human rights? We are joined by Agwang Susan Juliet, a legal research officer, who's going to be giving us details coming in from this particular one and maybe informing us on a couple of things on how this internet right does get to work. Good morning to you, Juliet.
Good morning to you. How are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Good to have you on the show.
Great being here as well.
Fantastic. He's called Willis Daily. You'll be getting to hear from him later on from now. But first and foremost, I want us to, get in between what a human right is. This is something that, we have talked about over and over again. But at the end of the day, we still have cases where some human rights are violated and people usually don't know how to go by it. Maybe it could be because they don't understand what human rights is. In your own opinion, as a legal research officer, how would you clearly define human rights?
Well, thank you very much. A human rights, like you note, unfortunately, many people are not even aware that probably this is a right or they're entitled to something. So in very simple terms, a human right is something that you're entitled to just by virtue of being a human being. And it's something that is inalienable. And I mean, when I say inalienable, it's, you're entitled to it. No one has a right to take it away from you as a human being. Whether you're black, you're white, it is yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, quite interesting. Talking about human rights, we understand Uganda has advanced itself as far as, the right of freedom of expression is concerned. Do we have any limits to this one as far as, exercising this particular right is concerned?
Yeah, sure, that is very true. Because again, if we say that I am entitled to a human right, let's say maybe probably to own property, and then I bring one of my properties and instead it kills another person. So now we're going to strike a balance. I enjoy my right, but my right should not also infringe on another person's right. So not just in Uganda, but we have where Uganda also derives its laws from, that international law itself recognizes the fact that there should be limits to rights, okay? So it's not to entirety. You have the international declarations on human rights, like the Universal Declaration. You have the International Covenants on Political and Civil Rights, and then down to the continent, you also have the African Commission and Charter on Human and People's Rights. And all these laws say that, we're entitled to the rights, but we have limits to them. But to what extent? So as we enjoy our rights, we shouldn't cross the boundaries. And there is usually a three-part test, which both national and international laws provide, which amongst others, the obvious one is national security. But apart from that, there is also limit of morals. Okay, and then of course you have personal safety of other humans as well. So you have in Uganda Article 29 provides for right to freedom of expression. 41 talks about right to access to information, amongst other rights. But then when you go down to Article 49, it also tells us that in enjoyment of your right, you should not infringe on another person's right. Exactly.
So when should we have a limitation? When should we know when to draw the line, despite the fact that, we're exercising our right of using the internet?
Now, of course, the law clearly has to provide that the limitation is here, like I have already stated. And when the law provides for it, whether you know it or not, usually they say that ignorance of the law is no defense.
Yes.
So it's usually the duty of the state to ensure that people actually know about these limitations. So if we say that I have a right to life, should I take another person's life? Then the law will be operating the other way around, that your life may also be taken as well. If I have a right to property, should any other person just come and walk through my land because you have freedom of movement? So all these things have to be clearly stipulated, and all this comes from international law as well.
All right.
Yes.
Susan, we understand that, the internet is used to disseminate information, and anyone has a right of using the internet and their social media platforms to give out any information they want. Now, there was a lot of of, controversy coming in from, our very own Stella Nyanzi, who was put to courts of law by the president after she went on social media using the internet to say a couple of things that, were not pleasing to the president. Some people were saying he didn't have the right to, sue her. Others were saying it's actually right. Now that we have you in studio, is it actually right? And can someone be sued despite the fact that they have used the internet and encroached on the other person's privacy?
Well, one also...
I want us to put the example of Stella Nyanzi into the consideration.
Yes, I'm going to bring that into context. Now, the right to the internet is not just an independent right. The right to the internet enables us to enjoy other rights as well, amongst which include freedom of expression, which you talked about earlier. We have right of access to information. Now, despite the fact that we have international frameworks and then also we have national frameworks that provide for right to access these rights and the internet. Now, when we come to limitations, the laws must be providing for this. Now, in Uganda, well, we have the constitution which provides for all this: enjoy right to information, freedom of expression. Then we also have other laws that have been put in place, of course, to curb, or not to curb, but to put a limit to the enjoyment of your right. So, of course, in Africa, apart from those other laws I have talked about, we have the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms. Now, these principles were developed by Pan-Africanists, members of the African Commission, that let's have people enjoy a right to internet in given segments. So Uganda is a party to that. And to strike a balance between enjoying my right and not affecting another person's right, Uganda has gone to establish laws for both sides. Now, we have the Computer Misuse Act. Whether it is in support of the internet or not, you have to look into the provisions and actually see whether it meets to it. But as civil society actors and vibrant citizens, usually we go through these laws and try to compare them with what international frameworks and domestic frameworks provide. And then you realize that certain laws are promulgated not necessarily for the benefit of the citizens, but it's like a political agenda. If you are saying that the right to information to the internet is a human right, very fundamental, and then you set up laws that instead not just regulate, but entirely violate the right to access to the internet. So usually these are just political moves. Annoying the peace of the president.
Is it even right? Is it even correct, according to, the law fraternity, for us to compare, the knots with international countries before we sit down and come to a conclusion on our very own laws?
Well, of course, our very laws must also derive their powers from other international laws, because we're members of an international community. But the problem usually comes in where governments try to copy and paste laws from other countries. Let's the number of times where government has said, but it has worked in Kenya, it has worked in Tanzania, we need to regulate people. But are we the same as Tanzania? Are we the same as Rwanda? We are the same as Iran. At the end of last year, you remember that the government decided to shut down the internet in Iran. But we forget that, yes, we are trying to limit one thing, but we forget that we are affecting almost 90% of all the rights that people have. Some people use the internet for trade. I read TV or radio station will use the internet for delivering information.
Broadcast, yes.
But at the same time, also we have government websites, platforms where people get information from. So if you shut down the internet because another country has done that and it worked, do we just have to borrow and copy and paste them when our situations are different? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yes.
Willis, you're a very huge fan of the internet, and I'm sure at this point you'd like to chip in on this conversation.
The internet is a very funny place to be. But for me, my question would be, is the access to internet a right by law, or it's just a conversation that has been going on for some time? I remember we were talking about the right to internet and internet freedoms 2 years ago. And before we know it, we have the Computer Misuse Act. And we have no one talking about the right to accessing internet. So is it a law, or is just a conversation? So I can't sue a communications company for cutting off my data, after 3 days. So is it, I just want to know, is it law, or is just a conversation going on?
Well, the internet, like you say, either it's law or a conversation. it's really a conversation. And when it is a conversation, it's that conversation that enables me to enjoy any other right. We're talking about freedom of information. How do you access information, Willis? He says you're a huge fan of the internet. So for you to get what you want out of the internet, you're looking for information. And for you to be stopped from getting that information, they're shutting down the internet. So how are you going to be informed about something if your entire life, there are people whose entire life depends on the internet? So it's that conversation that enables me to enjoy almost every right. Yes.
So how then is it a right if it's limited, if it's controlled? If you say that the MTN, Airtel are the ones who are responsible for the internet in Uganda, but then you say it's a right. What of those that cannot access those communication networks? They are in far areas and they can't get to the internet. Do they also say it's my right to internet? Is it for those who can afford the internet?
Well, the internet is a right for everyone, like whether it's my mother deep in Kumi district or it's me who is living in Kampala, I'm entitled to it. Now, when you look at key principles on internet rights and freedoms, one of them is equality in access to the internet. Whether I am a girl or I'm a boy, whether I am from the village, I speak English or I don't speak English, now that is solely responsibility of the state. You have had a number of times that even people have gone to points of suing the government for having failed to translate the constitution or translating laws. Of course, civil society will chip in sometimes when they have the funds to translate some of these laws, because these principles are looking for inclusivity, that everyone must have a benefit to the internet.
Isn't it too early for Uganda to consider internet as a right? Considering we're just even testing 5G just yesterday. We're still on 3G and even getting to 3G, a huge number of Ugandans are not yet on 3G. Isn't it too early for us to say, okay, it's a right?
Well, when you say whether it's too early, then you will be left behind, Willis, okay? The 2030 UN agenda, and we're only left with 10 years to come down to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG goals of let's reach 2030 and see how every continent is faring. 4 out of every 10 African has access to the internet. So where are the 6 people? Should we say that it's too early for Africa to, ask for access to the internet because maybe we cannot compare ourselves to the 5Gs in the world? No, we can't really be left behind, and that is what the UN is also striving to achieve. Now, the UN has assigned Mohamed Amin to try to change the statistics of access to internet in Africa. And what does he have to say? Last week on CNN, he said that the biggest challenge to Africa has been, raising the statistics of access to the internet. And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to sit down? He says no, that it's time for us to rise now. If we want to actually have something to say that we have moved towards achieving the 2030 UN agenda, then the time is now to ensure that people actually have access to the internet for us to meet up with.
And anything that government is doing, good in terms of making the internet a right. If you look at my UG Wi-Fi, my Kampala, is it? There were all these Wi-Fi spots, and I remember Minister of ICT was saying you can just go anywhere and access the internet. Is the government on the right track, as well as, of course, regulating it in terms of the people that Derek is talking about?
Well, it's one step at a time. We've just been talking about government shouldn't be copying and pasting how certain things are applied in other countries regarding the internet, but also we need to move swiftly and not retard ourselves by instead making so much to violate other rights. So if the government has tried to, let's say 50% of Kampala people have access to a free. It's an assumption because I've not even accessed this internet. It was only a conversation which has died out. If the government becomes a step towards, whether it is 0.5%, that's a step 2. So if we have enablers like policies and laws to access to the internet, we shall steadily be moving. Before you know it, we're at 80%. But where we are coming up with a policy, which is really great, and citizens are acknowledging that. And then all of a sudden you're slapping another law, which instead takes us back to 0.0.
Doesn't it kill your argument when you are saying that we need the access to internet as a right, which is something that doesn't originate in Uganda, so you're copying it from somewhere, But yet you point a finger at government and say, stop copying those other laws and take this one. Yet you're also getting it for somewhere. Isn't it sort of...
Well, I said, stop copying bad laws. If Iran switches off the internet because citizens are violating, and then Ugandans today decide to violate, and then the government says, since it worked in Iran, let us also use that. And then let's compare any other country. The US, a big giant in access to the internet technology, is up there, and they are moving steadily to achieving so much of their sustainable goals. And we borrow what we can afford and implement it in probably free access to the internet. What we are doing, these are two scenarios. Scenario one is borrowing a bad thing. Scenario two is borrowing a good thing. So should we say that if you want to borrow a bad thing from here and a good thing from here, it should be at equal proportions? No, it shouldn't be that way.
So
Talking about 5G, I want to understand, do we even have the structures in place to support this one?
Well, I haven't followed so much conversation about the MTN's new 5G agenda, but what ordinarily we should be expecting is one, government should be checking these telecom companies. Okay. You've realized that mobile money transactions, for example, MTN is charging way a higher amount, and then Airtel has cut its rates to a point whereby I am never going to send money using MTN. I'm going to send it using Airtel. Yeah. So the government should be coming up with policies that, you know, we are all at the same level, because you're cutting off a number of people if MTN is regulating itself, because it knows that probably we are the biggest, we're the biggest service provider. We came here a long time ago, and so many of them cannot do without us. We should be having policies that put all these service providers at the same level, because we also want to bring our people at the same level.
And for me, just a last one. At what age do you think someone should be enjoying the right to internet access? Is it the internet rights? At what age? Because some of us have kids, and what you're saying is that my 14-year-old son is going to want to access Wi-Fi in my house, and I can't take the phone from them because they have the right to internet. So at what age are we talking about in terms of that right?
Human rights have no limit, whether I am a 2-year-old child or I am 57 years of age. Now, what you're talking about is slightly something related to managing how my children, for example, access the internet. Now, that the government is going to enter your bedroom and say, please, your child should not be overplaying games or doing ABC. Now, the government's role towards ensuring that we have access to these fundamental rights is to the point of, we have a right, let's enjoy it, but as they are also trying to ensure that we're actually enjoying these rights. Now, where the limits come, for example, the African Declaration also talks about privacy and, you know, trying to ensure that whichever person is online is protected, right? So if today my children want to watch porn, they decide to watch pornography, and I find them watching pornography, do we expect the government to come and punish them? No, this is you and your children and morals, but having a right to the internet is for everyone, whether it's a child or whether it's a big person. Great children have done great things, even at 4 years of age, they've developed
using the
apps.
internet.
So but isn't it one of the reasons why government is saying, hold on a minute, we're not ready for internet as a right? Because
well,
now
the government is actually ready for internet, because it has also done
because it's going to give us the right to internet. Our kids are going to get spoiled, and we're going to come to daddy and say, but
I think for the kids, getting spoiled is more of, you know, a parental level. How do you
I don't
let
think
your
so.
kid
Government,
access
for
the
example,
internet,
says,
you know?
government comes and says, you are not allowed to drink alcohol below the age of 21. And everyone just puts it out there. So you, as a parent at home, are helped by government to protect your child. But what you're saying is that internet has a right for everyone, meaning,
I think
meaning that a child at home can say, my friend, give me the password to the Wi-Fi, or I'm going to sue you.
How toxic do you think the internet can be in the first place? Because you're trying to compare, you know, a toxic substance to a non-toxic substance. You know?
Well, I can give you an example. I just recently found one of my brother's children watching porn. He's way below 15 years of age, and he's accessing the internet.
And then you, as a parent, you should have blocked the porn
but
sites.
How?
Give him the internet.
The kid will say, I want the password to the Wi-Fi. If not, I am suing you for infringing on my rights.
Give him the password, but block the sites. I mean, even DSTV has parental guidance control.
Exactly. Exactly. You're going to cripple a great mind by saying, thank God the government is having the Computer Misuse Act or whatever it is, anti-pornography, because my children don't need these phones. 2 years ago, I used to say, I don't think children should be having tabs. They don't,
They
you know
don't
how
need them.
someone is with their phone and I am sitting next to you and you're flipping your phone and you're not even talking to me.
Yeah.
So that is something that started with children as well. Yes, they have the cartoons in their tabs and they're not listening to you. And I thought that it was a bad thing. But then when I gave birth and I have my own child, and I asked myself, am I not retarding my child? Because I think that, when they are on the phone, but then technology comes with precautions. He's been talking about parental guidance and all this. Utilize them. You're not going to say because the children of the 19th century or 18th century had no access to these things, you're going to stop a digital child of today from accessing the internet.
But since we're talking about rights, I want us to go deep into the African Delegation on Internet Rights and Freedom. I believe there are some principles that go by this one. But before we get into the principles, what does this African Delegation on Internet Rights and Freedom mean?
Well, I hinted it in the beginning that the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedom, this was a document drafted by Pan-Africanists, people who are interested in fostering enjoyment of human rights. And they do not have their own agenda, but they have the support of the regional body, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And we've had so many declarations that have cropped out of these documents. When you look at access to information provided, for example, by Article 9 of the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Now, when you have the African Declaration, what we are trying to do is to narrow down these rights, okay? You have one big document that provides for the right, but then we are now getting that provision and trying to break it down to speak more to principles of the internet. So this declaration has been in existence for quite a time, unfortunately. Most people are not aware about it, just like so many other declarations and laws, even regional ones. Most of us are not aware about them. Personally, I got to know about the African Declaration like 2 years ago, but this is a document that has been in circulation for over 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still talking about it, being a right, does that mean that as a citizen of Uganda, I can actually sue my government for failure to access the internet in terms of service delivery? Is it possible?
It's very, very true and very possible.
But isn't that sort of defeatist?
Why?
The government cannot afford the infrastructure to deliver services using the internet. But here you are giving me as a Ugandan the right to access,
sue, to go ahead and even sue the government.
Are you not? That's why it goes back to my question. Aren't we being too fast in the conversation? Shouldn't we be having, a little less speed than we have now? Like you say, it's been 10 years in circulation. Don't we think we need another 10 years before we actually make it a right? Or maybe some of these guys in government don't even understand what the internet is.
And besides, why haven't we had any cases where someone of your nature or someone who knows their rights about the internet come out and sue the government? Because, he talked about the Kampala Wi-Fi, which you had never accessed. And I believe it would be a starting point for you to sue the government. Why haven't we had people come up to actually do this?
Well, you're very right when you say that. Now, we've also had shortfalls in implementing some of these things. By the time the government commits, signs and ratifies and signs, and even goes ahead and implements some of these things, it means we are ready for them. And it's not justification usually for us to say, we have no money. You Willis knows that we have the money, but we are only not putting the money in the right places. And whenever government realizes, politics is a very dirty game. When a politician realizes that, I think when I give these people a right to express themselves, they hurt my feelings. We are all human beings, okay? So if Stella Nyanzi, for example, says the she's using satire and allegory,
I think
choice
you're
of
massaging
words.
it. She's using insulting language. She's abusing.
Well, how you want to say it is different from how I want to say it. So I feel a pinch. I'm like, no, I need to put this lady in her place. Yes, she has freedom of expression, but I think it's high time that we came up with the Computer Misuse Act. So then you're going against a document that you signed 5 years ago, committing yourself to implementing it. But because you feel like someone is challenging you politically, let's switch off the internet. Because you don't want, you know that this is 21st century and the internet has a big role. I can communicate, take a picture of a polling station, and I'm like, someone has stuffed in ballots, or we're being beaten while, you know, casting our ballot. And because it's like a wild bushfire, everyone is going to know about it. Even CNN will know about it in the next 5 minutes, and then you slap it to it.
Okay.
Now, going back to litigation, we also have so much challenges when it comes to enforcing my right through the court of law. You'll find that my grandfather instituted a suit 17 years ago, but up to date, that has not been heard. And even his children have tried to pursue it, and it's not yet disposed. So you realize that the person who was affected 17 years ago has died and did not even get fruit out of his suit, even if he was on the right. So frustration has gone to the point that I think even the justice system is too slow and it's not going to help me. So what am I going to do? Take my frustration to social media, say a pair of buttocks and it hurts someone, and then the law is again slapped on me, and instead I am again pushed down in a hole. Yeah, so it's more of also frustration of the judicial systems.
All right, before we get to wrap up, you know, when we talk about the internet in Uganda, you can't go away without talking about over-the-top tax. Now, last but not least, as a legal research officer, isn't this tax infringing on my right to access the internet?
It's not just the OTT. We have so many. We have so
So
many.
you accept that it is actually encroaching on my right to access the internet?
Yeah, and this is a conversation that has not yet ended. Some of us have been smiling since last week when you are openly said that we have failed to, you know, you set a target so high for us to get revenue out of OTT, but people are evading them thanks to technology, okay? That
Thanks to the right you want us to have.
So
Because now we
thanks
can't
to technology,
block social
so
media.
some people who are so defiant, and myself inclusive.
Oh, you
for
don't pay
some
OTT?
time. No, I had to eventually
You are a beginning investor.
I eventually had to give up because you will also realize that VPN is a little bit slow, or even it's also more expensive. You end up spending more data. But of course, you have those diehards who I would rather give my money to somebody's child who developed the app instead of being, you know, this all comes from frustration.
Okay.
So the OTT conversation has not ended. And I think that it's high time that the government really sat down and reviewed this. URA has come out to them and said, you
This
know,
has failed.
it's just hard to, yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Agwang, Susan Juliet, of course, for giving us information as far as our right to access the internet is concerned. It is a conversation that is still going on social media, so you can definitely be part of it. And remember that we as well live on social media pages, Facebook and Twitter. We're going for a very short break, but when we do get back, this time around, we get straight into the love letter.